relentless killers in history. In this episode, we explore the terrifying story of Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Cannibal. Join us as we delve into the gruesome details of his crimes and the twisted mind behind them.
Milwaukee in the 1970s and 80s, a city that was undergoing significant transformation, grappling with the challenges of a changing economic landscape. A city of industry, of blue-collar grit and a simmering undercurrent of unease. The streets were filled with the sounds of factories, the hustle of workers, and the quiet whispers of a community on edge. It was a time of change, of economic hardship, and a growing sense of fear as crime rates rose across America. The economic downturn hit hard, leaving many without jobs and struggling to make ends meet. This was the backdrop against which Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, a seemingly ordinary boy, would transform into one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. His story is one of darkness and horror set against the backdrop of a city in turmoil. The city's shadows, both literal and metaphorical, would become intertwined with Dahmer's story, a chilling reminder that darkness can lurk even in the most unexpected places. The alleys and back streets of Milwaukee became the stage for his gruesome acts. This is where our story begins, in the heartland of America, where a monster would rise. The Midwest, often seen as the epitome of American values, would be forever scarred by Dahmer's actions. The Rust Belt was struggling. Once thriving factories were now silent, their machinery rusting away, a stark reminder of better days gone by. Factories were closing, leaving behind unemployment and despair. Neighborhoods were changing. People were afraid. The sense of community was eroding, replaced by a pervasive sense of fear and uncertainty. It was in this environment ripe with vulnerability and anonymity that Dahmer found his hunting ground. The city's anonymity provided the perfect cover for his heinous acts. He preyed on the fringes of society, young men, often transients or runaways who were less likely to be missed. These individuals, already marginalized, became easy targets for Dahmer's sinister plans. Their disappearances often went unnoticed, their stories untold, lost in the city's underbelly. The urban landscape swallowed them whole, leaving behind only questions and grief. Milwaukee's gay scene became a particular focus for Dahmer. The vibrant nightlife, filled with hope and freedom, was tainted by his presence. He frequented gay bars and bathhouses, using his charm and promises of alcohol or drugs to lure victims back to his apartment. The places meant for joy and connection became hunting grounds for a predator. The city's gay community, already marginalized and facing prejudice, became increasingly terrorized as Dahmer's crimes escalated. The fear was palpable and trust was shattered. Fear and suspicion gripped the community as young men vanished without a trace. The sense of safety was eroded, replaced by a constant state of vigilance. The police, overwhelmed by rising crime rates and often indifferent to the plight of marginalized communities, were slow to connect the dots. The system failed those who needed it most. Dahmer, a master manipulator, was able to evade suspicion for over a decade, all the while perpetrating unspeakable horrors behind the closed doors of his various apartments. His ability to blend in and deceive those around him was chilling. The city, blinded by its own struggles, remained oblivious to the monster in its midst. The true extent of Dahmer's atrocities would only come to light much later, leaving a scar on Milwaukee's history. Jeffrey Dahmer was born in 1960, an outwardly normal child, but beneath the surface there were signs of trouble. A fascination with death, a detachment from others, a growing darkness that no one seemed to notice or understand. Was he born evil, or was he shaped by the circumstances of his upbringing? It's a question that continues to fascinate and horrify. His childhood home in Bath, Ohio was a picture of normalcy, a middle-class family, 2 parents and a younger brother. But appearances can be deceiving. His mother struggled with mental health issues, while his father, a chemist, was often distant and preoccupied with work. Young Jeffrey, starved for attention and affection, found solace in solitude. He developed a morbid fascination with death, collecting animal carcasses and dissecting roadkill. What began as morbid curiosity soon morphed into something more sinister. He began experimenting, dissolving the bodies in acid, fascinated by the process of decay and the power he held over life and death. As Dahmer entered adolescence, his internal struggles intensified. He grappled with his sexuality, his burgeoning desires at odds with his deeply ingrained feelings of shame and inadequacy. He felt like an outsider, unable to connect with his peers, retreating further into himself and his dark fantasies. The line between fantasy and reality blurred. The boy who collected animal bones was on the verge of becoming a monster who craved human flesh. The summer of 1978, the air was thick with humidity and the days seemed to stretch endlessly under the blazing sun. Dahmer was 18, his parents recently divorced, his world in turmoil. The once stable foundation of his life had crumbled, leaving him adrift in a sea of confusion and anger. One humid June day, he picked up a hitchhiker, a young man named Stephen Hicks. Hicks was carefree, a stark contrast to Dahmer's inner turmoil. It was a fateful encounter, one that would irrevocably alter the course of Dahmer's life and unleash a reign of terror that would last for over a decade. This moment marked the beginning of a dark journey. Dahmer invited Hicks back to his family home, now empty after his mother moved out. The silence of the house mirrored the emptiness Dahmer felt inside. He offered him beer, hoping to prolong the encounter, to savor the feeling of power and control. The alcohol was a means to an end, a way to keep Hicks there just a little longer. But as the day wore on, anxiety gnawed at Dahmer. The fear of abandonment, of being left alone once more, began to consume him. Hicks talked about his girlfriend, about leaving town. Each word was a reminder of the life Dahmer felt slipping away from him. The thought of Hicks walking away, of losing control, filled Dahmer with a rage he couldn't comprehend. It was a rage born of years of repression and loneliness. In a moment of blind panic, Dahmer struck. The fear and anger that had been building inside him erupted in a violent outburst. He bludgeoned Hicks with a barbell, silencing the chatter, the fear, the reminder of his own loneliness. The act was swift, brutal, and irreversible. The act was brutal, fueled by a potent cocktail of repressed desires and simmering rage. It was a moment of horrifying clarity for Dahmer, a realization of the darkness within him. Hicks, a young man full of life, lay dead on Dahmer's bedroom floor, the first victim in a long and gruesome saga. The room, once a place of refuge, had become a scene of horror. Overwhelmed by what he had done, Dahmer panicked. The reality of his actions crashed down on him, bringing with it a wave of fear and regret. He dragged Hicks's body to the crawl space, the stench of death filling the air. Each step was a reminder of the irreversible path he had chosen. In the days that followed, he dismembered the body, dissolving the flesh in acid and crushing the bones. The process was methodical, a grim task that he carried out with a disturbing detachment. He scattered the remains in the woods behind his house, desperate to erase any trace of his crime, to convince himself it never happened. But no matter how hard he tried, the memory lingered. A dark stain on his soul, a terrifying glimpse into the abyss that lay within. It was a haunting reminder of the monster he had become, a shadow that would follow him for the rest of his life. Section 4. A killer's pattern, modus operandi. After the murder of Stephen Hicks, Dahmer spiraled. He joined the army, seeking structure and escape, but his inner demons followed. Discharged due to alcoholism, he drifted, his life a blur of dead-end jobs and fleeting encounters. But the urge to kill, to possess, to control never truly abated. It festered within him, growing stronger with each passing year. In 1987, Dahmer killed again. He picked up Stephen Tuomi at a bar in Milwaukee, luring him back to a hotel room. The pattern was set. Seek out vulnerable young men, lure them with promises of companionship, alcohol, or money. Drug them, rendering them helpless. Then the killing. Strangulation was his preferred method, a chillingly intimate act of domination. But Dahmer's crimes went beyond murder. He was driven by a macabre fascination with the human body, a desire to possess and control his victims even in death. He would photograph their bodies, posing them in grotesque tableaux. He experimented with cannibalism, a horrifying act that spoke to his need to completely consume and obliterate his victims. Dahmer kept trophies, skulls, bones, even preserved body parts, grotesque mementos of his crimes. His apartment became a charnel house, the air thick with the stench of decay, the refrigerator a macabre collection of human remains. He lived a double life, a seemingly normal young man by day, a monster lurking beneath the surface, his dark secret hidden in plain sight. Section 5. The Scent of Decay, unraveling the truth. For over a decade, Dahmer operated undetected, hiding in plain sight. His victims, often on the margins of society, vanished without a trace. Their disappearances barely noticed, but the walls were closing in, the net tightening around him. The stench of death, a constant companion in Dahmer's life, became his undoing, a scent that could not be masked. Neighbors complained about the foul odors emanating from his apartment, a smell that grew more unbearable with each passing day. Police were called, but Dahmer, always in control, always the manipulator, managed to explain away the smell, to deflect suspicion with his calm demeanor. Then, on July 22nd, 1991, everything changed, the day that marked the beginning of the end for Dahmer. Tracy Edwards, a young man who had gone to Dahmer's apartment, managed to escape, his courage setting off a chain of events. Handcuffed and terrified, he flagged down a police car, his desperation evident. Edwards told a harrowing tale of being drugged, threatened with a knife, and held captive in Dahmer's apartment, a nightmare he barely escaped. He spoke of a strange smell, of photographs of dismembered bodies, evidence of the horrors within. Skeptical but intrigued, the police officers accompanied Edwards back to Dahmer's apartment, not knowing what they would find. What they found inside would shock the world, a scene of unimaginable horror. Polaroid pictures of dismembered bodies scattered around the apartment, a grim catalogue of Dahmer's atrocities, a human head in the refrigerator, a macabre trophy, a vat of acid in the corner used to dissolve his victims. The stench of death, overwhelming and undeniable, filled the apartment. Jeffrey Dahmer, the seemingly normal young man who lived at apartment 213, was a monster unmasked, his facade shattered. The discovery sent shockwaves through Milwaukee and across the nation, a community in disbelief. The details of Dahmer's crimes, the sheer depravity and brutality, horrified and captivated the public imagination. A story that would be told for generations. The man who had blended in so seamlessly, the quiet neighbor, the polite employee, was revealed to be a monster who had walked among them, preying on the innocent and vulnerable, a predator in disguise.
Thank you for watching Infamous Killers in History. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Join us next time as we delve into the dark and twisted story of another infamous killer from history.